Good morning, Mayor Heron. Thank you for taking a few moments out of your day to speak with TV7.ca. We have a couple of things that we wanted to discuss with you. A couple of community questions from some organizations as well as private citizens.
Okay.
So I guess I'll just jump right into it. What do you feel is the overall, attitude among St. Albertans on the traffic issue that yourself and council have been working on for the last little while? There's been some signal optimizations that have been taking place specifically on St. Albert Trail. Is there a guess and test? Is that still in the process? Can you give us a quick update on how that's coming?
So yes, you're asking specifically about St. Albert residents and their views of it. I guess it depends on who you ask. Mm-hmm. We were just talking ahead of time. You're never going to please everyone, mm-hmm. and I try to make the expectations that it will improve, but it will never be perfect.
That's fair.
You're never going to get from Costco to the Henday without hitting a red light. Well, maybe, and buy a lottery ticket that day. It could happen. The lights used to be timed, if you want to call it timed. We call it, anyway, they were timed such that in the morning we would try to have as many green lights heading south, because the majority of residents in St. Albert, I think we're at around 65%, still work mm-hmm. in Edmonton. So, and their goal was to get to work as fast as they can. But as soon as you have all the lights going south, green, you're going to have a little bit of the north direction delayed and the east to west. But you still have to turn on mm-hmm. to St. Albert Trail. So they were timed as much as they could. The problem is they were timed based on data that might have been collected a month ago, because it wasn't real time. Every one of our lights has a little camera that sticks up that does counts, and under the old system, our staff, and actually even still, our staff, our engineers would have to drive out, hook a computer up to the light post, download that information for each one of them along the trail, take all that data back, throw it into a computer. That would take a couple of days of analysis. Right. They would get some ideas of what they could do to change it, and right. then the algorithms, which actually the U of A is helping us on, mm-hmm. and then they would have to take it back out, do each one. So it's not adaptive and it's not real time.
Labor intensive.
And so at the end of the day, when people are trying to get back into St. Albert, we didn't try to get them home as fast as they can, because at the same time, St. Albert Trail is our one and only commercial corridor, and people on their way home from work are quite often asked by their spouse or their child to pick them up from school, mm-hmm. to pick up some dry cleaning, we need milk, etc., we need gas. So we were trying to get people safe access to the commercial corridor.
Right.
So that's how we time it, and it's not at all a good science. So what we've been working on over the last 2 years is to do this adaptive signals. Mm-hmm. Before you can even have adaptive signals, they need to talk to each other. So a lot of money has been invested to lay fiber all along St. Albert Trail and in other areas of the city, but St. Albert Trail is where we're focusing with the traffic, and we just sort of hooked them all up in September. And the fiber didn't even go from Giroux up to the Costco till this year. So it's been a staged approach because it's expensive. And now we've got the lights talking, we've got better data, and the ultimate goal is that as waves of traffic are hitting lights, a light will stay green longer to allow a giant wave of traffic to go through. And so that one light will adapt to the current situations. And if you're sitting at a red light and there's nobody else at any of the other 3 intersections, it will change for you to go through. So it's a learning system, and it's going to be great. But as I've said, you might be the one car that wants to go one direction, but 30 cars want to go the other. You're going to have to wait. And that one person is not going to be happy. So I'm never going to make anyone completely happy with traffic.
Of course.
But I always say to people, we do live in an urban center. And the ultimate and number one priority for myself, this council, and this city is to get you from A to B safely.
Now, was there any discussion when it was coming forward as to what to do with the signal optimization, to take a different approach and instead do a controlled lane change like what they have on 97th? Was that not something that was going to work with our current infrastructure on St. Albert Trail?
It was studied and talked about. The problem is St. Albert Trail is divided, so we can't really do that. We've talked about doing that on Ray Gibbon, and that still could happen. But this was the best approach. So the controlled lane change really, we talked about it, it was kind of ruled out very quickly.
So it's just going to be a matter of kind of guess and test and see.
There's not a lot of room along St. Albert Trail to expand the roadway right? The right-of-way isn't that big.
Right.
So.
Thank you. One of the other things I wanted to touch on was some of the recent criticism that has come on social media, mostly, with regards to the art installation at the St. Anne Street roundabout. A lot of the residents have raised concerns that not just the cost of the installation, but the origin of the artist not being considered local talent. Is there anything that you can speak to put residents at ease with regards to where the funding for that comes from and how the program is integrated to help perpetuate the careers of local artists?
I feel like there's two parts to that. So the funding for public art comes from a policy that allocates about 1% of our capital projects. When we do, I don't know, $20 million of capital every year, but 1% of that is put in a reserve towards art in public places. So when asked, I always say I completely support that policy and the fact that St. Albert prioritizes public art, because it's part of our brand. And the social media attention that we got kind of almost highlights it, because there was some anger that it was a Quebec artist. And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why isn't it local? It would have been. And so we've had good conversations with our culture department, and when you think about it, it makes sense. Local artists were absolutely invited to put in a proposal for this. And if we were to limit only local artists, we would have probably had a nice piece of art. Yet, if every city across Canada limited it to their own local artists, how does that make my local artists competitive nationally or internationally? Right? I want my local artists displayed in Quebec. So some of them will put in a proposal in a Quebec city, and hopefully they'll be chosen. And I will cheer for them, because that's what their ultimate goal is to be recognized across Alberta, across Canada, and hopefully internationally. Right. So I would never restrict talent from coming into our city. There's that project particularly was enveloped in public participation. We spent the entire summer, we set up at the farmers market and other places across the city, Service Place, wherever there's people, asking for their opinion. We had this dot voting system. You could vote where you wanted the public art to go. So the roundabout was one place, but there was Kingswood Park was another choice, and there's a couple different places. So people chose where it was going to go. And then in September, at the end of that summer, we had a big session at the Art and Theatre. I went, and there was a couple hundred people in attendance. The 4 finalists presented their ideas, and everyone there got to vote. And so the committee took all that into consideration before they chose this artist. So if you really want to have a say and you really want your local artist, you're going to have to come and participate in these kind of things, because they're fun. And you can say, I got to choose that piece of art, or I didn't choose that one, that wasn't my favorite, but I was part of the process. So I want to continue with that kind of public participation when we choose art.
Right, that does make sense, to try to give local artists the platform, and we can't talk out of both sides of our mouths saying we want local artists to be recognized internationally, but then we not give international artists the same consideration.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes
sense.
sense.
Very well.
Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to discuss is, about a year ago, the bylaws were amended in St. Albert to allow properties that qualify square footage and area-wise to construct a second residence. Now, there's been some noticeable growth in garage suites and garden homes and that kind of thing. I know that the City of Edmonton does not allow for a public dispute, I guess, or they can't appeal the builds.
Right.
And St. Albert does. Is there any plans to kind of bring the two cities closer in alignment with what is allowable for neighbors who maybe dispute these?
Let me clarify that, because it's not exactly right. So we, in last February, did change our land use bylaw. We added some new districts. So any of the new districts, we are allowing for back alleys and narrower lots. And those areas you can apply for a secondary suite, whether it's a basement suite or a garage suite, and those are permitted uses. They won't be appealed.
Okay.
So we do align with Edmonton in those newer areas. The older existing neighborhoods, we felt that we would ask that we still allow the secondary suites, but we put it as a discretionary use. So whenever something's discretionary, they do a radius, kind of like a mail out to the neighbors, asking their opinion, and they can appeal. And we felt that was appropriate because we could potentially be changing the character of an older neighborhood. And so 3 have been approved, and I think 1 was appealed, and it goes to the Subdivision Appeal Board, which is a quasi-judicial body that every municipality has, and they make the final decision on whether the suite can go ahead or not. I think they all went ahead. All appeals were denied. So it's a process, and it takes a little bit longer for those builders to put them in if they are appealed. But at least the residents have a right to voice, and maybe some of them won't be appropriate. Maybe they're 3 stories high and too big, or cover too much lot, whatever.
Fair enough.
I think I think it's a good balance. But in the new neighborhoods, absolutely, they're permitted, and there's no appeal.
Excellent. Thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
The Plugged In Community Center is asking, they have commented on our Facebook page, and they say, we are ecstatic that the City of St. Albert has made inclusion a priority in our community. Our question is, what programs have been made available to the community to educate, support, and fund inclusion initiatives? That's
a really big question because there's a lot, and I really honestly don't have enough time to go into it.
Okay.
My number 1 recommendation is go onto our city website, go under Community Support Development /inclusion. There's a ton. There's videos, and there's all the programs are there. Right off the bat, a couple years ago, I'm a member of the St. Albert Rotary Club, and Rotary has a program called Rotary Employment Program, and it's about hiring people with developmental disabilities. So I brought that program into the city as a councillor, and we have come up with now with an inclusive hiring policy. So we have a whole policy that when we're considering certain jobs in the city, we reach out to some of the agencies like Gateway and Losica and see if they have appropriate people that are looking for employment, temporary. They might need supports, but the city's making it work for them, because we really honestly believe in honest day's wage for everyone, right? And good pay for good work. We don't want volunteers doing things. We're actually going to pay people to do things.
Right.
And so that's people with some developmental disabilities. I was thinking about just this year at the Children's Festival, we had a whole program, and then we spent some money on to allow kids with sensory issues, if it's too loud or too bright. We had equipment there, we had special rooms for them there so they could participate. So we have, we did the Starts With Me program, so it really talks about, as a city we can do a lot. But really, it starts with me. It starts with you. Right. It starts with everybody in this community. When you're walking down the pathways and you see, and I know there's a couple Belrose kids here, so they'll like this. You see a couple of teenagers with a hood over there. A lot of people in this city, especially the older generation, get fearful. They just don't understand the youth of today, and they're making assumptions. So we have videos on our website that talk about why you're making those assumptions.
I have a couple youth of today. I don't understand them either.
Should you take a step back, like put yourself in their shoes? What are you assuming that could potentially not be right? Just stuff like that. Okay. It is such a huge focus for this city. It's a huge focus for every municipality across Alberta. I go to Welcome and Inclusive Communities workshops all the time. It's a never-ending quest. This council has done a lot with Indigenous. Before we were even sworn in, we had an elder come and do a smudging ceremony in council chambers.
I recall that.
And Friday I will be going and doing a Métis Day declaration. So we built the healing garden across the river. So we're trying to recognize all the groups. Rainbow Crosswalk. One of my biggest thrills of this short time that I've been mayor was putting on Facebook. I know we're going to talk about reaching out to people, and I put this poll on Facebook. 50,000 people responded to a poll on whether we should build a crosswalk or not, and it was overwhelmingly in support of the crosswalk. Some comments about cautionary why we shouldn't. In the end, you get a grassroots group of people that bought paint at Canadian Tire and got a bunch of kids with rollers, and all we had to do as the city was block the street off for a few hours, and it was a celebration. Huge accomplishment of inclusivity. The Out Loud Kids is our group that promotes the LGBT community, and they're fantastic, run by volunteers. completely volunteers. So a lot of the stuff is grassroots. When we had our racist letter come to the Anderson family a couple weeks ago, the city really didn't have to do anything. The community just jumped, pop up, barbecue the very night it happened, and then they organized something at the Grain Elevator 2 weeks later. So I'm really proud of the way this community has embraced inclusion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It seems like the steps that we're taking are progressive and in a generally positive, respectful, consensual.
Yeah. But as I said, it's going to be an ongoing conversation that might never end.
Right.
Yeah.
And in continuing with that, the Facebook platform that you mentioned, how is Coffee with Cathy coming? I tune into it myself regularly. For anybody that's watching, if you haven't had the chance to take it in, I strongly recommend it. It's a fantastic platform that you can interact with the mayor, and you get to see Boomer and get a little glimpse into how your day usually starts off.
I did it a bit during the election because during an election especially, things are happening very fast, and I wanted instantaneous access out there and answering questions and talking. And you can door knock, but you might hit 100 people in a night of door knocking, or you can sit in front of a camera and invite people into your home and have the same conversation. So I try to do both. It's the number one guideline I've kind of been following is I will do anything and everything to reach out to the public. Not just so I can tell them what's going on, but so I can also hear what they need to tell me and answer questions, make clarification. So Coffee with Cathy, I was sitting at Socrates, my daughter works there, and on Sunday waiting for a table for breakfast, and there was a guy sitting beside me and he goes, "Are we supposed to have coffee today?" And I didn't recognize him, and I don't think I had any makeup on and my sweatpants on because we were going to do some chores later. And I'm like, "Was I supposed to have coffee with you?" And he's like, "Is it Coffee with Cathy today?" So he watches it. I never met him in my life, but he watches it, and he goes, he really enjoys it. So I think the viewership goes up every once in a while. I'm trying to do things different. The last one I did, there was some confusion. The Grandin residents thought I was going somewhere to have coffee, and they could join me. And I thought, well, that's actually not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea.
Do that? And then we could maybe do the Coffee with Cathy from Good Earth or from Tim Hortons. And so it's evolving.
I'm certain your fan base will follow as long as you continue to have Boomer.
I think Boomer is the big attraction. That's my dog. And I want to do it in my house sometimes, so I feel like I am a real person. I have my own family to deal with and take care of, and that I don't wear makeup every day, and that I'm not sitting in this office on the 3rd floor of City Hall unaccessible. I want to be accessible.
There's a relatability there that comes in when you actually have cameras in your home and you're saying, "Hey, this is me in all my glory," kind of deal.
And I answer every email that comes into my office. I think there might have been 2 that I have not answered because of the vile language in it. And and those people don't need an answer. They just need to get something off their chest. Right. But I will answer even the really harsh criticisms. I answer every email, and same with those Facebook Lives. I answer every question, even the hard ones, because there's lots of hard ones out there.
And I think going back to when the voting and bringing you into office, I think your supporters. That's one thing that was kind of a general consensus among them, was that we knew that would be the stance that you would take. In speaking with different platforms and whatnot, that there was absolutely no question that would be.
Yeah, because I can guarantee you, just like I said, I can't please everyone. There's going to be some decisions that I make as the mayor that people won't agree with. But if you agree with 90% of my decisions, that's not, so everyone will have their own disagreements with me. But probably we don't even agree with our own spouse on 100% of the issues. So that's normal. True. And I accept that.
We discussed earlier, myself personally, I can't be a person that 100% wraps my arms around a party or a person. Right. It has to be policy based. I mean, I can see different policies from either ends of the spectrum that still have a common sense base that I can get behind. So, hopefully there's enough in what you have already done for the city and what you'll continue to do for the community that speaks for itself, regardless of what the naysayers are gonna.
And that's the best part about local politics, is there is no parties. It's a non-partisan place, and it's very policy based. That's why I like it. I would hesitate to ever get into party politics. It's just not me.
Changing topic here, one of the other things that was brought forward not too long ago was the upcoming annexation of about, was it 20 acres?
Oh, no, sorry. There's 2 annexations going on.
Can you touch on that for me?
There's a small annexation with the city of Edmonton, which when I see Don Iveson, I always giggle because it'll happen, and I can't wait for the front page of the Journal to say St. Albert annexes Edmonton. It's a tiny piece of land. It's the piece of land. It's some of the pieces of land that have been essentially orphaned that are north of the Henday, but they still belong in the city of Edmonton's boundaries. Mm-hmm. They're orphaned. The city of Edmonton can't service them, or it's really expensive for them to drill pipes under the Henday. So sure. It just makes sense for them to become part of the city of St. Albert. So we're going through those negotiations right now. And there's a specific piece of land in that annexation that we really want to build some recreation on. So that might be the one you're talking about, but there's a big one.
The larger one is the one I was referring to.
Which is not 20 acres. I think it's about 2,100 hectares or something. Hectares. Yes, it's huge.
Yeah, well, there was the smaller one, and that is set aside. Has that been set aside specifically for I guess another arena or some form of civic center?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. There's a part of it is we're looking for recreation to be sitting there, but there's other pieces that I'm not sure what we'll do with yet. They're just orphaned, so we'll take them over for Edmonton so they don't.
And then some of with regards to the larger annexation that's coming up, some of the residents there, I guess, have some concerns with regards to what that will do long term. I know the city has made some concessions in different tax.
We haven't actually honestly started the negotiations on how we will compensate Sturgeon for that land, because when the boundaries change, we will have to compensate them. The 2007 election involved, I think it was about $80,000 a year for 10 years, and plus a share of some of the Walmart assessment, because that is non-residential assessment that we all really need to make our municipalities sustainable. This annexation we're not annexing anything that's built. It's all going to be farmers' fields and land. So it'll be probably some similar conversations. We will probably not, we'll pay them some money for the land, and then the residents that are currently county residents that become St. Albert residents will probably be paying county taxes for quite a number of years but if they decide to sell their land to a developer and we start putting houses on, then they become part of St. Albert tax base. So it'll be a negotiation process.
Once again, that common sense approach, trying to find
both Sturgeon County, Sturgeon County's been great. They understand that that we need to grow. Of course. And St. Albert's not going to get that land and sprawl all over it within 2 years. We're gonna grow responsibly, which means infill, like the suites you talked about, and higher density, which is the narrower lots in the back alleys and some of that kind of stuff in newer neighborhoods, because we don't want to take up that land if we don't have to. It costs us money to drive garbage trucks further out or drive the transit further out, so we're going to avoid it. But at the same time, I have 3 kids living in my house. They can't live there forever, and they want to live in St. Albert, and they want to get married.
Did you hear that? You can't live there forever.
Actually, there's 3 of mine and 4 of my boyfriends that live there. There's a big family living there, and we only have the middle-sized garbage can. I like to tell people that.
Wow. We'll have to touch on the recycling and your commitment to that as well.
Yeah. But anyway, if my kids want to live in St. Albert, then I'm going to have to find land for them to build a house on. Yeah.
Excellent. Couple of last-minute things before we wrap up our interview today.
Okay.
How is the filling of the advisory committees coming?
We have this council, although we're called part-time, is spending all day Saturday away from our families to interview over 52 applicants for the advisory positions that we need to fill by January. So yeah, it always goes well. We are always inundated in a positive way with residents that want to participate.
Good.
It's always a hard decision because there's so many good people that want to help out.
Oh, well, that's better than the alternative.
Exactly, yeah.
And one of our viewers, Lutz Pappenfuss, is concerned about the recent changes to the recycling program. Can you explain to him why the changes and what the city is planning on doing in the future to help divert some of the increased waste?
Okay. And really, we need a whole separate interview for this.
I know you have a passion for the waste management.
But it's not an easy explanation.
Of course.
The city of St. Albert has 3 streams of garbage, blue bag, and organics. The city itself picks up garbage, and we take it to Rose Ridge, which is a landfill just up north of Mornville. We contract out the blue bag and the green, and the blue bag is still going to a company called Green for Life. And most regional municipalities actually use Green for Life as their contractor. The only other option is the City of Edmonton has their own MRF, Materials Recycling Facility. Mm-hmm. So there's only two options in the region. It was Good for Life, Green for Life, GFL.
We'll keep plugging that gym here in St. Albert. Maybe one of us will get a free membership.
GFL came to us and said, you know what, we're taking your glass and we're taking your plastic, and for a long time we've had nowhere to sell it. And so they were stockpiling a lot of it. And the glass, so glass is an interesting one. It is recyclable. The market is just very thin. Sometimes there's nobody to sell the glass to, and sometimes a new business will pop up and they've got a great idea. So GFL will sell whatever they stockpile to this business. But the other problem with glass is it breaks in your blue bags and contaminates the rest of the bag. So we will continue to accept glass, but you will have to drive it up to Mike Mitchell Recycling Center in Campbell. So when you're going up there for your bottle depot run or going to Service Place, just bring your glasses up there and throw it in the bin. I'm really hoping residents will do that and not just throw it in the garbage. Plastics is a different issue. The issue with plastics is, I think all of North America and probably most of Europe was sending their plastics to China for processing. And China is one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the world. You can question their human rights activities, you can question their labor laws, but you can't compete with them, which is unfortunate. So it was really hard for any North American business to take that plastic and produce something as cheaply as China. Right. And so they couldn't compete. So it was
We're
all
never
going
to
to China.
beat those guys.
It was all going to China. But China was starting to say, like, St. Albertans are not rinsing out their yogurt containers, and some of it's got glass in it, or this black bag is not recyclable. So we were contaminating our waste and sending it to China. And the global issue of ocean plastics, like 99% of world plastics in the ocean come from 8 rivers, and 7 of them are in Asia. So you got to question if a Safeway bag that I brought home one day ended up in the river or in the ocean. And I honestly think it probably did, because we weren't auditing and checking. So I guess the City of St. Albert should be saying to GFL, are you doing with this responsibly? GFL should be going to China, are you dealing with this responsibly? We've had a wake-up call. China said no more. And I guess probably part of the problem was it happened really fast. And we've been playing catch up. So our response in the short term has to be, we can't take some plastics. Right. We're still taking lots of plastics, not like we're still taking your shampoo bottles and some of those types. But the clamshells and the film plastic is really hard to recycle, and there's no market for them in Alberta or Canada. So they will temporarily, I'm hoping, end up in the landfill. But because there's no competition with China anymore, I'm hoping our marketing entrepreneurship in the Western world will step up and have a great business idea, and we'll adapt. St. Albert is considering a plastic bag ban, and so that is sitting in front of our Environmental Advisory Committee. Right now, I think it'll come back to us in November for a decision. We'll need some public input on this. We will not be the first municipality to do this.
Certainly not.
We actually talked about it in about 2012, and the recommendation was don't do it. But I really feel St. Albert residents are ready, especially with all this other stuff going on. So I think they're ready for a ban on plastic bags.
It seems to be the way things are progressing all over the place. We're going to have to catch up, or we're just going to get left behind.
I love the conversation that's going on in this community about reusing like your pickle jar to put flour or sugar in when you go to Bulk Barn, right? And people are doing that. Or I went shopping with my daughter the other day, and I embarrassed her because I brought bags, but she's 17. I do everything I do embarrasses her. And at the same, we bought shoes, and I left the box and all the paper at the shoe store, and they were looking at me, I'm like, I don't want them. The producers and the retailers have to start taking responsibility as well.
That's true.
So some of the criticism that St. Albert's doing nothing, it hurts me, because we are trying. And me personally, I sit as the chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee for the Alberta Urban Municipality Association, which is really an active advocacy group to the province saying we need legislative changes. The province needs to make legislative changes. We have the worst record in Canada, Alberta does, because we allow it. BC has what we call, well, most provinces has what we call extended producer responsibility, which meaning that they make the producer of everything deal with the end of life of that same product. And so when a producer is deciding whether to package their T-shirts in styrofoam popcorn or into paper, they're going to have to pay for the styrofoam popcorn, so they might choose the paper because paper is easier. So
that's a
those
great
are the kind of
concept.
decisions that producers need to be thinking about,
Right.
and consumers need to be thinking about as well.
Very true.
Yeah.
And for residents that have questions on those new, I guess, laws or what's been changed and opted out of the recycling program, where can they get that information?
I think the best is the app,
Yeah.
Be Wastewise app. It's fantastic. First of all, it reminds me to put my garbage out because I quite often forget. So you get a little notification on your phone, it's garbage day. But at the same time, you can type in almost any product into the search bar and it tells you whether it should go to garbage, blue or green.
So we haven't advanced to the point where I can say, Siri, where do I throw my clamshell?
Almost.
We're
And
getting
the city website does a good job too.
Of course.
So I still think if you put in glass, it might tell you to put it in the garbage, but I'm really trying to encourage people to drive it up to Mike Mitchell.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all of the information
Sure.
today. We really appreciate you specifically in council and everybody that's supported the TV station taking time out of your day to just, sit down with us, answer a few basic questions, readers, groups, that sort of thing, just to kind of help facilitate that community involvement. So thank you so much.
Anything I can do to increase public involvement and knowledge of what's going on. This
Great.
is
So
just another way.
next week this time?
Anytime.
Awesome. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yep.